welcome to the Little Black Box. My name's Leighton. Thank you so much for coming out tonight to see Casablanca, the artwork. Various artwork is appearing on screen behind me now. When I started to research Casablanca, when I cut and pasted everything off the internet earlier on this afternoon, that's fine. Every writer who introduces it says, how do you introduce Casablanca? Where do you start? So what I've decided is I'm not going to say anything about the plot. I'm not going to say anything at all about, very little about the production. I've kept stills from the movie to an absolute minimum. You need to discover, I think, Casablanca for yourself, but I'm going to go into briefly the two main stars and not why it became the phenomenon it did, but how. Because why, I kind of want you to, again, find out for yourself. Very quickly, it was rushed into production in 1941, following Pearl Harbor, when obviously all the studios were desperate to get patriotic pictures out as quick as possible. Warner Brothers adapted the screenplay from an unproduced play, Everybody Comes to Rick's, which at that time was the most they played for an unproduced work ever. Casablanca did not set out to be this great big movie. It was an A-list picture, it was a prestige picture, but it wasn't a manipulative blockbuster in the same way that Gone from the Wind was. That it also stars 5 or 6 of the greatest character actors of the time is just happy serendipity, really. The cast and crew were truly multinational. Director Michael Curtis was Hungarian. He made many, of course, other famous pictures. And out of the entire cast, only 3 were born in the US. On its original release in '42, it did decent rather than great business. When it was re-released in '42, it did much better, and of course, when it won the Oscar, it obviously attracted a lot more people to it. It won the Oscar for Best Film. Then it went away. It wasn't until 1957, the year that Bogart died, at the Bristol Theatre in Cambridge, Massachusetts, of course the home of Harvard University, where they had a Bogart season and Casablanca completely sold out. It became a tradition every year during the final week of exams to show Casablanca as many times as possible, and it attracted a huge cult reputation. Every single screening is sold out, and it continues to this day. It was then that the critics started to reappraise it, analyse it. You know, if in film studies you're going to be taught Casablanca, it's a textbook. Of course, it was made very much under the production code. Now, the original script needed several changes. The sexual nature of the relationship between the 2 lead characters, all references to that had to go. And the production code, when they saw some rushes, they said Claude Rains is playing it a bit too swishy. Don't know what that means. In other words, tone it down. Out of academia, it's Claude Rains' character, and a line he says in the picture, quite early on or halfway through, and the final line in the film, that has meant that there's a lot of gay subtext in it, but that's, of course, up to you to decide whether or not. But it is quite interesting. Right, the American Film Institute, starting in 1998, they put together lists of, this is people in the industry, of the greatest American films ever. 100 years, 100 movies, 100 stars, 100 quotes, 100 passions. Casablanca is at 3 after Citizen Kane and The Godfather. Sight and Sound magazine, from the British Institute, they polled both directors and critics. they are considered, that is considered the list. Casablanca does not make either the critics' top 10 or the director's top 10. But as Roger they, again, the critics go for Citizen Kane 1 and Vertigo 2. Excuse me. But as Roger Ebert says, Casablanca is probably on more lists of the greatest film of all time than Wells's, because of its wider appeal. It has much more wider appeal than Kane, Vertigo, even The Godfather, actually. 100 Years, 100 Stars. Number 1 of the greatest male stars of all time was Humphrey Bogart. Number 4 was Ingrid Bergman. Bogart, no other actor has been imitated quite so much. He'd been around since actually The Silence, playing heavies, gangsters, thugs. It was 2 movies in 1941. High Sierra. And of course, The Maltese Falcon, where he played Sam Spade, and that is the film, the role that became his archetypal role. Cynical, hard-boiled, laconic, hard on the outside but with a vulnerable surface. Now, this is what attracted the producers of Casablanca, and contrary to popular belief, he was the only actor they considered for it. It was the fact that women were very positive about him after this, that they cast him as a romantic lead in Casablanca. After Casablanca in 1942, his career just sort of, skyrocketed. He made a lot of films with his wife, Lauren Bacall, who he met in 1943. The Harder They Fall was his last film in 1957, before he passed away of cancer. Just as an aside, the scar, his infamous scar on his lip, was, depending on who you asked, if you asked the the Warner Brothers publicity department, it was a war wound. Unlikely, because he didn't actually join the Navy until after the armistice was signed. His best friend claimed that it was being punched in the face by a prisoner of war who was wearing handcuffs and caught it, or as David Niven said when he asked Humphrey Bogart about it, I fell over when I was a kid, which is probably the most likely. Bogart had an off-screen reputation as a hellraiser. That's my favourite quote of his, and this is my favourite quote about him. Bogart's a hell of a nice guy until 11:30 p.m. After that, he thinks he's Bogart. Dave Chase was a Hollywood, owned a restaurant in Hollywood at the time, one of his great friends. Okay, then we get on to Ingrid Bergman. Bergman was already an established star in her native Sweden. She came to Hollywood in 1939, starring in the English language remake of Intermezzo, which did very well, made her a star. After Casablanca, again, this was the one that really made her A-list. She appeared in several movies. She was Academy Award nominations for all of them. She won for Gaslight. She had effortless ability and great range, a warm, sensitive, dignified presence. Notorious, one of 3 films she made for Alfred Hitchcock. He was actually devastated when she was forced to flee Hollywood. In 1939, she contacted Italian director, part of the Italian New Wave, Roberto Rossellini, saying how much she admired his work. He invited her over to appear in one of his films. They immediately, very publicly, began an affair. They were both married, both had kids. In 1950, this was a serious scandal, and even though she was actually denounced on the floor of the Senate, the US Senate, even though public opinion was in her favour, she had to flee, basically. She fled to Italy with Roberto, where she had further children, one of whom their eldest daughter, one of their twins, Isabella Rossellini, became an actress herself, most famously known for David Lynch's Blue Velvet. She returned to Hollywood in '58